Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to show you how to replace the Kawneer. This is their part number 133636 dogging device on a 1786 series exit bar. So, first of all, with this dogging kit, you're going to get seven pieces. First of all, you're going to get the business end, the dogging device. Okay, you're going to get 4 screws that you need to hold that down onto the chassis, onto the touch bar, the back side of the touch bar. They are included. Okay, you're going to get 2 dogging keys. Actually, these are great to get these. Kawneer charges a lot of money for their dogging keys, and you will get 2 dogging keys when you purchase the replacement dogging package. So I've had a lot of customers say, hey, how do I replace the dogging assembly on the device? And I said, well, you know, I've never done it before, but it should be easy. And what I find with exit devices and parts, just keep removing screws, and then you'll sooner or later figure out, you know, what has to be removed in order to make it work. And this is no different, really, except that this requires a little bit more of a commitment in the sense of, okay, I've got to basically, you know, mostly disassemble the exit device, or at least halfway, but the bottom line is it's super easy. So, in summary, what's going to happen with your exit device? Okay, you're going to need to remove both end caps. In summary, remove both end caps. Once you have the end caps removed, you will be able to slide this push pad back and forth to the point where the dogging assembly that's in here is going to bump into the spring-loaded mechanism that is responsible, with rollers at either end, that's responsible for pushing the touch bar back out. And you will need to slide the touch bar to one side so that you can remove the 4 screws of part of the spring-loaded articulating assembly so that you can get it to collapse, so that you can slide the touch bar off, flip the touch bar over, remove the 4 screws, put in the new dogging assembly, slide it back in all the way biased to one side, reattach the spring-loaded articulating assembly that pushes the end cap up and down, that pushes the touch bar up and down, then get the touch pad, I keep saying bar, it's a touch pad, the touch pad positioned correctly within the chassis itself, and there's only one correct way to do it, and I'll show you. Reattach the end caps and you're done. So it's basically simple in that regard. So let's take a closer look at how to do this. Okay, so step 1 of removing and replacing the dogging assembly on a 1786, it requires removing the device from the door. The head case cover has to come off. I actually have it here. The head case cover has to come off with its 4 screws. The end cap cover has to come off. That will, when you remove those, that will allow you access to the screw that will hold the device to the door, or, you know, through to the trim. That all has to come off. There will be a single screw that will hold it to the end bracket here. That has to come off. You've got to get your hands right down to this. Exactly is the problem. Once you have the device off the door, that's where this video will step in. What we need to do is we need to remove the latch assembly. This entire assembly has to come out. It's held in by a single screw that's on the back. That's why the device has to come off the door, because this has to come out. There's no way to get access to the dogging mechanism without being able to slide the touchpad, and removing this requires us to slide the touchpad. So that single screw is going to be there. We're just going to pull that out. There's not much to lose here, so I'm not really concerned with trying to figure out the best way to show it to you on camera. Okay, just going to loosen that screw and I'm going to remove it. My latch assembly Really can't go anywhere. I've got my screw. Gosh, don't lose that. Put that in a organized place. So now my latch will literally just slide out. You can just elbow it out at this point. Nothing here to break, nothing to worry about. So I'm going to put my device down. I'm going to carefully put my latch assembly on the side with its one screw. I have it off to the side. Make neat piles, individual piles of all of your parts. I always recommend working with something like this so that you can wipe your hands off. There's grease on everything. You don't want to have the buildup of lithium grease or whatever is in here. It's not lithium, but you know, by the time you're done, it'll look like a, you know, the engine of a 54 Studebaker. So you want just to keep it clean. Now at this point, it's time to remove both end caps. Now the problem with removing both end caps is when I first did it, and Kawneer is not the only company, but these screws, the two screws here and here, were hyper tight. Here and here. They were really tight. A well-fitting screwdriver is the only way to contend with that. Now, over on the latch side, the length of my #1 precision screwdriver by Weha, and speaking of that, this is just the quick little set that I keep on my desk, the Weha 26190. I'm partial to these precision screwdrivers for two reasons. Number one, they're amazing. They do the job very, very well. I wouldn't say that I'm partial to them for two reasons. I'm partial to them not only because I'm a distributor, but because I use the products personally and I can attest to the high performance of much of the product line. It has this rotating cap so that you don't develop a blister in your palm when you've been turning a screwdriver for 2 hours, which will happen. So the length on this screwdriver is adequate for the latch side because I can get it, once I have the device off, I can get that in there and I can turn it. Now these screws aren't nearly as tight as they were when I first took them out, thankfully. Put that screw aside. Your next screw is going to come out. Then your end cap will come out. There's really nothing to lose at this point. There's no parts that are going to fall out or jump on you at this point, so don't worry about anything just yet. Now the other side I found difficult because the length that I was dealing with was not adequate to allow my hand and get a proper fitment to the head of the screw, but I was able to do it regardless. It did come out, although if I did it often, I would have a longer screwdriver. This distance is about 7.5 inch, okay? But these screws have already been taken out a couple of times, so they're not hyper tight, even though when you put them back in, they're secure. Okay. The tricky part is holding this up to the camera so you can kind of watch or see what's happening. Now this end cap is different. It's got that plate on it, and it does so for a reason, and I'll demonstrate that at the end. But there's some extra parts that are inside of here that it relates to. Not to worry about those. Actually, for right now, forget about them. So at this point, we have the touchpad, the chassis. Now this thing can go back and forth. Okay, it can go back and forth as far as possible until that dogging assembly inside of here restricts it from any further movement. Okay. Now what has to happen is you've got to slide it to one side, because sliding it to the other side, well, you had to remove the head latch of the latching assembly. So I'm going to slide it away from there, because sliding it, it's just how I've done it. So I'm going to slide it towards the hinge side at this point. So let's take a further step. I'm going to pause this video so that I can organize my parts. So now we're going to slide the touchpad off. And so the dogging assembly is inside of here. It's evidenced by this little hole where you insert the dogging key. If I were to slide this all the way towards the hinge side, the dogging assembly is going to hit some mechanism on the inside. If I slide it all the way to the other side, it hits the same mechanism, and it's the spring-loaded. It's the spring-loaded return assembly that when you push the touchpad, those wheels will fall if I do that. It pushes it back up by means of those springs that are there, the black springs. So in order to do this, what we need to do is simply push the touchpad away from the pivot side, pardon me, pull the touchpad away from the latching side. This latching side had a lot more machining in the chassis than the pivot side or the hinge side. So we're going to slide this away until it stops. Yep. So you don't want to do what I just did where that wheel fell out. It's not a big deal. I know exactly what's there. I know how many of everything are there. 2 wheels, 2 washers, then the post. Slide that till it stops. I'm going to put my fingers here. Now what we need to do next, see those 4 black screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, those need to come out. Those 4 screws need to come out. At that point, what's going to happen is we're going to be able to take the wheels off, take the 2 plastic washers off. We're going to be able to remove this spring-loaded assembly, open up these bars, and then slide the entire touchpad assembly off. So that's what we're going to do next. And actually, let's get to doing that right now. Okay, so now we're going to actually remove those 4 screws. I'm going to take my camera. I'm just going to move that down a bit so you can a little bit better watch what's happening. I'm sliding this down. I'm going to get access to those 4 screws. I'm just going to put a little bit of control on that so it slides. And that wheel fell off. That's not the problem. It's not a problem. What you have to be aware of is there are 4 of these wheels in total on the job. You're not going to encounter... Okay, so there are 4 wheels, and then there are 4 of these small washers. There's a total of 4. There's 2 on this end, then there's two down here, okay? So those are going to come off. Just put them aside. Do not lose them. The problem with do not lose them in Kawneer is most of the parts that we're touching here are not available for purchase separately. Period. They can't be bought. They're not for sale. It's a drag. So at this point, I'm going to remove these 4 screws, and I'm just going to keep my chassis down on the top of my desktop as I remove these. You don't want to lose these screws. Okay. I have covered that adequately. One reason why I like these precision screwdrivers, I can really make time with it. And you're not using a power tool, and I suspect the power tool is why all the screws were initially too tight. You have these retaining brackets. You'll notice that there's a little tip or a nib on them. If you were to think of that as kind of looks like a bird a little bit, if you were to look at the head of the bird, that is very important. There's only one way that they can go on correctly, and that has to be pointed down or pointed up. They have to lip over the edge of the extrusion, just like I have it shown there. If you see the head of the bird, I've called it, so to speak. Okay. I'm going to take out my 2 retaining brackets. At this point, these aluminum rods, oh wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, they can come out. The retaining, or the axle, can come off. At this point, this entire item comes out. There's no way to put this back on incorrectly, so don't worry about that. So just put this aside. Okay. Now, here's what you all came for. I'm going to slide that now all the way down, because now what's happening is my dogging assembly is not blocked by any obstacles inside of there. I'm going to hold this all up straight so that the wheels here don't come falling off. And I'm just going to continue to slide it out. And sliding it out, you must do. You can't lift it out. It has to be slid out. So that's what the rest, and I'll put my hands here, of the assembly looks like. Okay. This piece of material here, that's the strike for the dogging assembly. Okay. This bracket that's down here has everything to do with keeping the touchpad in alignment via the pivot style end cap. I'm going to put all of this aside. And voila, there's your dogging assembly. I'm not going to go through the trouble of removing those 4 screws. You're going to remove those 4 screws. You're going to put your new dogging assembly on the way that you found it. The bottom line is this. I have kept this latch assembly, latch side, pivot side. I've kept it in that orientation. When I flip that over, the orientation of where that pivot, where that dogging catch has to be, where the bolt has to be, is exactly here. Put the new one back right down into the same position. Take that, don't turn it end for end, put it right back down on your desktop. Okay, so if I was replacing the dogging assembly, I would remove those 4 screws, I'd put the new one down, I'd tighten those 4 new screws, and I'd be done. That's all there is to this. Okay. Okay, so we have demonstrated where we got that. You've replaced it, you've put it back together. Now, let's put everything back together. Okay, we've got our chassis back here just the way we left it. And as we tip this, these wheels are going to fall off. This will all come apart, but there's really not much. 2 aluminum extrusions, C-shaped extrusions, the 2 wheels, the 2 washers, and then the axle that's in there. They come out, just don't lose them and put them back the way they were. Again, this is the pivot style or the hinge side of the door. Okay, so I am going to, what's the first thing to do? I've replaced it. The first thing to do is to put the touchpad back in the way I had it. So all I'm going to do is take it and slide it in. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure that I can get it slid all the way in. Now, what's happening here is these 2 rods, these 2 extrusions, I've got to spread those. As I said, not a problem. Okay, not a problem. I had inadvertently tipped that a little bit too far, but that's okay. We're going to put that right back together the way we had it without any trouble. You can kind of just watch me do it. No parts were lost, thankfully. Now, what I was attempting to do was to spread these 2 aluminum extrusions out so that they were not going to be an obstacle to the... What I was trying to do is spread these open so that the dogging assembly can slide in between them, which I've accomplished. So let's do that a little bit better on the camera. Okay. Yeah, they're really not going to hit anyway. Not that I can tell. So I'm going to push that and slide it in. What would be helpful at this point is for you to hold this down so nothing comes off. Continue to push that in. And actually, what I want to point out is there are rubber mutes here, okay, that help deaden the sound. Putting this back through, the wheels have to be pinched together slightly to make sure that they're seated correctly. And lift that touchpad up if you can, or it's a bit odd doing it from this reverse style angle. Yeah. So you need to hold these wheels in, pinch this down, keep pushing forward, and the wheels will fit right into the extrusion right where I have them, right there. You can see there's only enough room for them to fit right in that confined area of the extrusion. Take that, continue to push it all the way back until it stops would be just fine. So let's continue on putting this back together. I'm going to tip the camera down again. So our spring lifting mechanism, I'm going to place that right down into where it goes into the extrusion. There are a couple of white washers there, well, beige washers. You want to make sure that those are fit in between the extrusion so that it looks just like that. I've got my axle inside that prep. Okay, I've got my beige washer on either side here and here. Not a problem. I'm going to take my two mounting clips with my bird's beaks or my bird's heads biased towards the outside. What you have to do at this point is make sure that the axle is centered in the installation like I have here. If this axle is hanging too far off either side, you're not going to get your mounting brackets down so that they hold it securely. I'm just going to take this and move this down a little bit and put my mounting bracket right in place. I realize you can't see that very well from your perspective. I'm going to get one in position with a screw. Just tight to the point where it's basically not going to go anywhere. Okay, my other bracket will go in the opposite sort of direction. I'm going to put one screw in just so nothing falls out. Then I'll show you what it looks like. Not overly tight at this point. Okay. I basically have them in place. I'm going to bring in the other two screws. I'm going to connect those as well. Yeah, unfortunately, it takes a lot of work to replace this dogging device. I mean, it's not that it's a lot of work in the sense that it's difficult. It's just there are steps. Unfortunately, I don't know of a way. I've not thought of a way to do this without taking the entire device off the door. Because that latch assembly has to come off. Okay, I've got those nice and tight. Okay, so now what we need is our axle. Now first what we need to do is to bring, we're gonna push this spring-loaded down lifter down so that it meets our unit. We're in good shape. So I'm going to put my axle down in. I'm going to move this down so that I get my axle peeking through one side. I'm going to bring my other bracket up. I'm going to shim my axle down a little bit to the point where I get that axle through both of the holes, just like that. Doesn't matter it's off center at this point. It just doesn't matter. Two washers, little nylon washers on either side. Two wheels, one on each side. At this point, slide your touch bar over. Now we're in good shape. The problem is we don't really know how far over it goes. Doesn't matter at all at this point. The next thing to do is let's bring our latch assembly. It's going to slide into this feature of the extrusion between my fingers. I've got, there we go, right between here and here is where that's going to go. And you should have your one screw ready to go. Okay, I've got that fit in there really well. Now, the one screw goes in the back, right at the tip of my finger. This would be more enjoyable if it wasn't being done on camera. I would do it faster. Okay, I've got my latch, I've got my thumb pinched on my latch assembly so it's straight. I'm going to take my screwdriver and I'm going to tighten that latch assembly. Now, the latch assembly is now tight on the door. Okay? Push it down a little bit, bring your touchpad. Now you're in good shape. Now, the first thing to do is to add the dogging caps back, or pardon me, the end caps back. Let's put the latch side on first. Does it matter? Well, it doesn't matter, but anyway, just going to do it this side first. It allows me a little more freedom of sliding the bar closer to where I want it to be. Just going to hold that on with my thumb and my finger, holding the cap on while I bring my screw into the first hole. I realize you can't see that going in, but don't know that it matters too much. Just to the point where it's in there, and then I'll bring my screwdriver. And without knocking it out, I'll tighten that, not all the way. Don't want to tighten it all the way just yet. I'm going to hold that on there, get it positioned into where it goes. I'm going to give it a little quarter turn. Now I know it's seated. This one I'll tighten all the way. I will finish off tightening this side. Great. Now the end cap's pretty limited. The end cap is severely limited. It cannot leave at all. Okay. The touchpad. I can pull it out. That's no problem. But I'm going to stop over here. I'll just lower that down, push it back up. Now it's time for the pivot side end cap. And the deal with this is that feature, that metal feature, this bracket that's here, this is what has to ride right in this area. And that's what's going to govern the position of the touchpad. That little tongue right at the tip of my finger, that's going to go down there. That's where that's going to go. So at this point, all I need to do, lift that back up and then bring my end cap so that it fits. And because that tongue is between the steel and the roller, it will govern exactly how far, it'll govern the positioning of the touch pad. And all I'm doing now is attaching the two screws, just like I did on the other side. And now we're at where we were when we started. We've got an exit device, albeit with my fingerprints on it. We'll wipe those off. You're obviously going to then replace the screws that were holding the device to the door. You down over here as well with the end cap. The end cap cover will go over. Your head case cover here will come over, and then your project is done. So, in conclusion, it's I have to admit I've been asked the question on how to replace the dogging assembly on this device countless times, and as I had said initially, how hard can it be? Well, people are like, I don't see how to do it. And I decided to bring a device to my desk and let me just make a video on how to do this. And I realized it's not obvious how this needs to be done. It's not obvious at all. The drawing doesn't help. There are no published instructions at all for this. And I just decided that while it's inescapable to make this a tragically long-winded video, there is a less than 2-minute version of it that just says do this, then do this, then do this, then reverse. There's no easy way to show how to do it if you're not familiar with exit devices. If you're familiar with exit devices, I think my initial logic stands. Keep removing screws till you figure it out. That has served me very well with every exit device that I've ever worked on. You know, the Asian import stuff you really can't work on. It's not really meant to be taken apart and rebuilt. But your top-tier devices, your grade 1 domestic devices, that material, you can take it apart and figure it out. And this does boil down to be a simple device. And the primary parts are available, but you know, if you needed a replacement touchpad, they're not going to sell you that, unfortunately. The head case cover, the end cap you can buy, the end cap bracket you can buy, but not everything. It's just, it's strange that you can't buy everything. You know, in Kawneer's defense, you know, they make doors. You know, I think hardware is a bit of an afterthought to them. Hardware is a means to an end. It's not our entire universe. Whereas with someone that does only hardware, well, we deal with doors naturally, but thinking of hardware, that's what we think of. So our perspective is quite the opposite. So they may not think about, you know, the maintenance person or the steward at the church or the distributor who gets the call 10 times a year. How do I replace the dogging mechanism? For them to actually say, let's make step-by-step instructions. I believe the thought just doesn't occur to them because they may not, you know, go through those steps. So there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all the Kawneer products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's service catalog, their product catalog, other encyclopedic documents that are there, as well as a link to their website as well, if I've not already said that. Any questions how to replace this dogging mechanism on a 1786 or any other Kawneer device or product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Okay, so we're doing a video on how to change the dogging mechanism on a Kawneer 1786 device. And I wanted to just make a video while I had all the parts basically taken off. You know, there's not a parts breakdown from the manufacturer that itemizes every single component, so I don't really know what all of these parts are called. The latch mechanism, that's certainly listed as a separate product, and that just comes right out of the head case and is really only held down with you know, with just a screw. So there's not too much holding that down. You also have your end caps, and they're different. The end caps are different on either end, but you'll have two end caps and the screws for those to be held down. Okay. The other parts that are here are the spring-loaded assembly, which is what is going to push the exit bar back. And none of the parts on the inside of here are available as replacement parts whatsoever. There is a catch for the dogging mechanism that's here. There we go. And that's not available as a separate product. So it might be faster just to say what is. The end caps you can buy separately. These cover plates, I believe, can be purchased separately as well. The dogging kit can be replaced as well. Okay, so this would be a replacement dogging kit for the 1786 device. So before I put this back together, I just simply wanted to record what all of this looked like. You've got 4 of these rollers, which are going to make contact on the inside face of the touchpad. You have some mounting blocks, mounting clips, and their screws to hold the retractor arms or the touch bar arms, the spring-loaded arms in place as they operate. Okay, so we're going to just pause this and we're going to put it back together, then we're going to continue on with this video.